What's up, guys? Welcome to the video. It's Sunday. I just woke up. I'm pretty excited for the NFL championship games today, and I've decided to give you a college basketball weekly recap this past week from last Sunday, so January 22nd to today, January 29th. And I figured that's the best way to talk about college basketball because it's been such a crazy season. It's such a fun season. If you don't really like college basketball, I suggest you watch it this year. It's one of the best years in recent memory. So much parity, and you just don't know who's going to win each and every night. So I feel like this is the best way to talk about college basketball. And here's my weekly recap. So I'm going to be doing this sporadically. I'm going to be talking about a lot of teams, but really in no relation to each other, unless it just happens that way. I'm going to have a picture of the rankings from last week's. They haven't been updated yet, but they're going to be in the right or the left-hand corner, either one. But starting off with the number one team in college basketball at the moment, the Purdue Boilermakers. They had a pretty normal week in the Big Ten. The Big Ten's not too strong this year. I think Purdue at the moment is the only ranked team in there, and compared to previous years, that is pretty wild. But they beat a Maryland team, a mediocre Maryland team, beat them by 3, I think it was. But the game really got close at the end. It really wasn't a tight game throughout. I think the last 4 or 5 minutes it got really tight, but Purdue pulled it out. Then they played Michigan in a game that was close. Purdue pulled away, and then Michigan made it close the last 2 minutes. Really wasn't any type of moment where you thought Purdue was going to lose either of these two games, even though the score might make you think differently on that. Zach Edey, the National Player of the Year in a lot of people's opinion right now. He had 24 and 16 versus Maryland. I think he had 2 blocks in that one. Then he had 19 and 9 versus Michigan and 2 blocks as well. They play a pretty good Michigan State team today on Sunday. So I will be talking about that game in my next weekly recap. But yeah, Purdue, number one team in the nation, and still have a lot of confidence moving forward. Moving on to the number 2 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. Like I said in my intro, it has been a crazy week, and it really starts with Alabama. In my last NCAA video, I talked about Alabama being the hottest team in college basketball, and they really were. Since December 15th, they lost to Gonzaga on that day, and then since then, they were beating teams by 20, 40 on LSU, 15 on a good Arkansas team. And then this week, they came into, Mississippi State came to Alabama. Mississippi State came to Alabama and proceeded to pretty much lead the whole game, and then Alabama got down 10 in the second half and slowly got back into it and then pulled away in the last 2 or 3 minutes, but they only ended up winning by 3, 66-63. And then on the Big 12 and SEC matchup Saturday, Oklahoma just killed them. It was 93-69 or something. It felt like Oklahoma led this game by 40 at one point. But they just had no answer for, I think it was Grant Sherfield for Oklahoma. I think he had 30 points. And they just don't have a defensive stopper like they do in previous years. I thought that would be Brandon Miller maybe, but I know he's a freshman. Thought it might be Clowney or Quinterly. Quinterly has got some work to do defensively, especially because he'll probably go to the draft this year. But they just don't really have a defensive stopper like they did in previous years with Herb Jones, Kyra Lewis. You could even say John Petty and Colin Sexton for sure. But they just don't have that guy. And they have a lot to work on defensively for sure. But I still expect big things from Alabama, one of the best teams in the SEC, and I think they can get it going. Transitioning to Mississippi State, I really had no idea I'd be talking about Mississippi State today, but they really did have a wild week of college basketball. They went into Alabama after losing 4 straight SEC games, and a lot of people saying that Mississippi State could quit. They could just say the season's over, and a lot of people would understand. But, man, they went into Alabama, played a great game against them, led the Crimson Tide by 10 in the second half, and then slowly just lost it. They lost by 3. And so that was a real heartbreaker for Mississippi State. But then on the SEC and Big 12 matchup, I'm going to be talking about that a lot because it happened yesterday, and it really was a wild day in college basketball. But they welcomed 11th ranked TCU Horned Frogs, who have been really hot in the Big 12 lately. Mississippi State welcomed them in and got their biggest win of the season in overtime. Tolu Smith, he's Mississippi State's leading scorer and rebounder, had a career day yesterday. I think he is a senior, but he had 27 points, 13 rebounds, a few blocks. I know he had 2 blocks in overtime. They ended up winning this 71-64 in overtime. Mississippi State's still probably not a tournament team, but just a really inspirational and inspiring week for Mississippi State fans. Probably didn't think they were going to be able to do this or have a win like this the whole season, but it really happened. On the other side of that, TCU, they lost Mike Miles Jr., their lead point guard and captain of the team, 4 minutes into this game. And so their main priority, in my opinion, is to just focus on his health, because without him, he's their leading scorer. And without him, this team doesn't really go far, in my opinion. So yeah, like I said, crazy week of college basketball. I already mentioned 2 top 15 teams going down, and moving on to Houston, the 3rd ranked team in the nation. Temple came into Houston last Sunday and won the game by 156-55. And Temple had no business being in this game, but man, they stuck around. So Temple pulled it out in Houston, one of the biggest wins in college basketball. So Houston has now lost to Temple and Alabama. So what a wide range of losses. Houston, they finished the week strong, beat UCF and Cincinnati. Jarris Walker, their freshman forward, should be a first-round draft pick this year. He had a really good game against Cincinnati. I think he scored 25 points. I don't know if that's his career high or not, and I expect a lot of big things from Houston. Moving on to my pick for the hottest team in college basketball. I know I said that last time for Alabama, so it might be a curse, but it's the number 4 Tennessee Volunteers. They welcomed the number 10 ranked Texas Longhorns yesterday to Knoxville, and this game really wasn't close. The final score, I think they won by 11 or so, but this game really wasn't close. They led by 22 in the second half. Olivier Nakamoa, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and Zakai Zeckler, they combined for almost 50 points. I think Nakamoa had 27. And so they combined for almost 50 points, and really just a scary team in Knoxville right now. Moving on to the 8th ranked UCLA Bruins. They played USC, I think it was Thursday night, and they led this game by 12 at halftime pretty comfortably. Jaime Jaquez was having a pretty good half. And then they proceeded to lose by 13. They got outscored by 25 in the second half. Boogie Ellis, former Memphis Tiger, USC's point guard, he scored 27 of his 31 points in the second half. Guess how many UCLA scored in the second half? 27. So if the other team's point guard is matching your team's points as a whole in one half, that's usually not a good sign. But UCLA is still one of the best teams in a very top-heavy Pac-12. Them and the Arizona Wildcats lead the way. The 9th ranked Kansas Jayhawks. We now move on to the crazy Big 12, the best conference in basketball, in my opinion, especially right now. So many good teams in there. But Kansas had a really disappointing week, especially for their fans. 3 straight losses. They lost to Kansas State in overtime, so not a bad loss at all. Kansas State's a great team. Then they got skull-drugged by TCU. Then they lost by 22 or 23 in that game. Then they lost to Baylor in Waco in a game where Kansas only led for about 40 seconds the whole way. They finally got back on track. They beat a kind of a inconsistent Kentucky team yesterday in the SEC and Big 12 matchup. But Jalen Wilson's been amazing. National Player of the Year candidate. He's been great even throughout this losing stretch. And yesterday he had 38 and 9 versus Kansas State, 38 points and 9 rebounds. 30 points and 7 rebounds versus Iowa State. He had 22 versus Kentucky and 23 versus Baylor. Now, Kansas moves on to play Kansas State in Kansas in Allen Fieldhouse on Tuesday. So that's going to be a heck of a matchup, and maybe Kansas can get some revenge on their rival. Staying in the Big 12, like I said, it's the number 12 Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State beat Kansas State at home. What an amazing game that was. They solidified themselves as Big 12 contenders, serious Big 12 contenders. And for every punch Kansas State thrown, whether it was a 5-0 run, a 7-0 run to make it really close, Iowa State just kept throwing them back. Whether it was Caleb Grill, Jaron Holmes, Gabe Kalshire. Caleb Grill hit a huge 3 with about 5 minutes left. And Jaron Holmes just had an amazing night the whole game. So they fell big yesterday in the SEC matchup to a really good Missouri team, a really underrated Missouri team. Missouri has some really big wins over, I think they have beat Kentucky this year. I know they beat Arkansas. But speaking back on Iowa State, they're just really inconsistent. Their last 4 games they beat top 10 Texas. They lost to an unranked Oklahoma State team. They beat Kansas State, like I said, a 5th ranked Kansas State team at the time. And then they lost to an unranked Missouri team yesterday. So just a lot to figure out for Iowa State. They had the makings to be an amazing team. They still could win the Big 12 this year and solidify themselves as a 2-3 seed. But I believe in TJ Otzelberger. He's done great in his 2 years there, or might be 3 by now. But yeah, so I expect big things from Iowa State still. Hey, now we can talk about the Big East for the first time on my channel. The Big East, such a fun conference this year, especially if you like points. I mean, you're talking about 80, 85, sometimes 90 points a game in this conference. So if you like offense, Big East is a conference to check out. Besides the Big 12, I think the most entertaining conference in the nation. You got teams like Xavier, Marquette, Connecticut, Providence, and Creighton, even when they're hot. But for Xavier, Soleil Boom, their point guard, transferred from UTEP, he has just been a savior for them. Savior for Xavier. But I'll talk about him in a future video, maybe when I do the top surprising players of the year. But he had 21 versus UConn. Xavier played UConn. They went into Gamble Pavilion. They came out with a win. I believe that was Tuesday, maybe Wednesday night. So a huge win for Xavier, solidifying themselves as probably the best team in the Big East right now. They did not trail in that game. UConn made it very close at the final 2 or 3 minutes, but Xavier pulled away. Boom, on the other side of the 21, he had 2 points versus Creighton yesterday, and Creighton dominated the whole game. I think they won 84-67. So 3 weeks ago when they played Creighton, they won 90-87. So 64 yesterday compared to 90 points versus Creighton a few weeks ago, where Soleil Boom had 26. So just pretty inconsistent week for them, kind of disappointing, especially yesterday. But Creighton's a good team when they're hot, and I still believe Xavier's the best team in the Big East. The Baylor Bears, what a great week for them and their fans. I believe they're ranked 17 right now, and that will change after this previous week. They got a huge win against Kansas at home the other night. And a game where I spoke earlier about it, but Kansas they led for about 40 seconds of that game, and Baylor pretty much dominated on the scoreboard. Ended up winning by 6, but the Waco student section, the fans, that whole stadium, it was just like a sixth man in that building. You know how good that building can be, and especially how tough that building can be for away teams, but they really showed themselves the other night. They also got a big win against Arkansas yesterday, a pretty good Arkansas team. Ended up winning by 3. They were down for probably the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, and then Baylor pulled away, ended up winning by 3. Arkansas had a good look at a tying game, at a tying three-pointer, but they couldn't get it to go. So a great week for Baylor, and I expect big things from Baylor. Keontae George, their freshman, man, is he good. This is my first time talking about him on my channel, and that's probably a crime if you have a college basketball channel. And he had 24 against Arkansas yesterday. Came up with some big 3-pointers at the end of that ball game. So I think he might be a top 10 pick. I'm thinking lottery for sure, but man, is he good. Last team I want to talk about, the Arkansas Razorbacks, just because I'm a fan, not really any relation to the previous teams I just mentioned, except for them losing to Baylor. But man, what a rough stretch this has been for Razorback fans. They lost 4 games in a row: Auburn, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Missouri. Then proceeded to beat Ole Miss and then dominate LSU at home. And that LSU game really showed what we can be, even without a Nick Smith Jr., even without really good shooting, which we lack right now with Trayvon Brazile and Nick Smith Jr. out. We just really lack the 3-ball, and that really hurts us, especially when teams go zone. Baylor went zone against us yesterday, and we just really couldn't do anything about it. It sucks to see that, but so we got an inspiring win over LSU, and then if we could have beat Baylor yesterday, and a lot of people say we should have, I'm not going to say anything about officiating or anything. I don't really like to get into those conversations because they just piss me off anyway. But had plenty of chances to win the Baylor game, and we didn't. It would have been a good turnaround for the season, but we didn't win it, so it's just in the rear view right now. We have Texas A&M coming into Fayetteville, coming into Bud Walton Arena. Then we go to South Carolina. Then we go to Kentucky. So pretty big stretch for us. Hopefully we can turn some things around and see what we can do the rest of the season. So yeah, guys, that is my weekly recap from today, January 29th, to last Sunday, January 22nd. And what a wild week in college basketball. It's kind of why I wanted to do a weekly recap. I thought about just talking about the top 10 teams, but that really wouldn't have got anything done, anything talked about. So I'm glad I did it this way. I think I'm going to start doing them once a week, obviously. I think I'm going to start doing that. But yeah, if you like college basketball and you like these videos, just like and subscribe to the channel. Helps out so much. But all right, everybody. Thank y'all. I'm out.